Hey, John Gilroy here. As we are recording this interview, we're in the middle of a government shutdown. Today, let's look at the impact of a federal shutdown on security and maybe dive into the role of zero trust in combating a personnel shortage. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I'll be your moderator. Our guest in the virtual studio today is Gary Barlet, Public Sector CTO at Illumio. Gary, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, John. Thanks for having me today.
I looked at your background on LinkedIn. You've been here, you've been there, with this federal organization, the military, here and there, Hawaii, Texas. My goodness gracious, if anyone has an idea of how zero trust can impact the federal government, it's got to be you, huh?
I hope so. I've been doing government work for 35 plus years now, so I hope I can provide some insights.
Okay. Looking over the decades, we've seen government shutdowns. We know. My son told me that this one was 7 days, that one was 31 days. And a lot of people in town know the exact numbers of each shutdown. And you suggested that in this interview, maybe we turn the tables and talk about, the shutdown itself and how does that impact security? And maybe what role does zero trust have in maybe dealing with short staff? The local football team had a few people on the bench and they didn't do very well. I mean, the federal government now has a few people on the bench and they can't afford not to do well as far as security goes. So let's set the stage. Impact and security with the shutdown. What's your perspective on it?
So I'm going to start, John, by giving a shout out to my fellow former workers in the Fed. I realize that they're going through a lot right now. And I just want to thank them for their service. Those that are still going into the office and those that are not going into the office today, I know these are tough times. And the problem is exactly what you alluded to is the potential impacts that this has on cybersecurity for Fed agencies. You've got key personnel with key knowledge who aren't in the office necessarily right now. And the ones that are in the office are having to juggle a lot of different things that normally other people would be dealing with. So their attention might be split on different things. So this is not ideal for cybersecurity of federal agencies trying to protect the nation's data, as it were.
Good. So this concept of zero trust has been bandied about for a while now, more and more people using it. What advantage does zero trust have in operating in a situation with restricted personnel?
So there's a couple of aspects to that, right? So let's start with the general premise of zero trust, right? And the general concept of zero trust, which is always, trust but verify, right? Don't just have this open-ended trust where just because John was once allowed to do something, he should always be allowed to do something every time John asks to do it. There should be this constant verification. And that should all be done in an automated fashion, right? Through using technology to look at environments, look at information that's being accessed, look at who's doing the access, when are they doing the access, how are they doing the access. And that should all be intertwined in a good zero trust strategy where you're asking those questions all the time, every day, every second, right? And every time a user, a system attempts to do something, there should be this constant validation, right? And what that does is that lays in these inherent security that doesn't rely on human interaction, right? It doesn't require a large population of people at keyboards trying to make those decisions for you. You've got automated tools that are making those decisions and that are helping control that access so that the people that are working, the humans that have hands on keyboard, can focus their efforts on more select problem sets.
Let's boil it down to 3 words: automating security tasks. I guess that's the advantage of setting up a zero trust system in a federal agency before there's restricted staff, huh?
Absolutely. And another good aspect of a good zero trust strategy is to ask yourself, what happens when there's a breach, right? Instilling operational resilience in your environment so that if there is a breach, when there's a breach, because as you and I both know, the adversaries only have to be right once to get in. The defenders have to be right all the time. And unfortunately, they can't be right all the time. So a good zero trust architecture takes into account the fact that a breach is likely to occur. And then you have things in place, you have tools in place that prevent that breach from spreading across your entire enterprise and shutting things down.
Well, Gary, we're recording this on Zoom. I don't know if there's a new feature in Zoom where I can transport you 5 years in the future and you can look back. So I'm this Zoom button here and you're 5 years from now looking back at this time. And so you write the history of 25 as far as cybersecurity, the federal government goes. Are you going to see an increase in attacks during this period when the shutdown took place?
So honestly, I think, unfortunately, the answer is yes. Our adversaries, they watch the news, right? They're paying attention to what's going on. I guarantee, not as if we weren't targets to begin with, but I guarantee that they have really ramped up their efforts during this time of turmoil, uncertainty. I guarantee that they have ramped up their efforts right now.
I was talking with some people about audits and reports that federal agencies are tasked with, and I would think that if an agency has a solid zero trust strategy, it's going to make some of these reports a whole lot easier, so the compliance easier too. So it helps in more ways than just security, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So there's nothing an auditor loves better when they come in. So I used to work at the United States Postal Service Office Inspector General. We had a lot of auditors that would audit postal. So auditors love data. They love proof, right? They love things that can prove that you've done something, right? So good zero trust environments provide data that shows how you've implemented security controls. It's just not a matter of, oh, I wrote it down on a piece of paper, right? That doesn't do any good, right? Writing a policy is not the same as having a policy that's enforced so that either users have to do something that you expect them to do or prevent them from doing something you don't want them to do, right? So having a good zero trust environment in place that enforces those paper policies, but actually does it at the, let's call it the keyboard mouse level of your users, or the ones and zeros levels of your different applications, and then be able to produce data that shows that to an auditor so that they know, right? They can see with their own eyes that things are allowed or not allowed, they're enforced or not. That's how you pass an audit, right? Is when you can actually convince an auditor, hey, this isn't a paper tiger, right? There's actually some substance behind this. And if you've got a good zero trust architecture in place, you should be able to easily produce data that backs up any policy that you may be talking to them about.
Gary, you've seen a lot of agencies from the inside and the outside and had a lot of experiences, and I'm sure you've seen legacy systems there. And we know they're there. And when I think of Illumio, I think of microsegmentation and zero trust. And so you have this modern concept of microsegmentation, let's say, and how do you apply it to a legacy system? Is it an intermediary? How does that even work?
So great question, John. So at the grand scheme of things, a good segmentation solution, and I will tell you Illumio is the best one out there, can take into account not just legacy systems, but the most modern systems that are coming out, all the way up to including, these new AI deployments that are going on. And what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to take different systems and ring fence them off from each other and create protection boundaries around each individual application and sometimes down to the individual servers that comprise those applications. And what you're doing is you're taking your environment and you're creating hundreds and hundreds of rings of defense so that if an attacker gets in and breaches one ring, they can only go so far before they run into another wall. Then they have another wall and another wall and another wall that they have to continuously try to get through. And what usually happens is the attackers run out of steam, right? They run out of room to roam. They get detected very quickly because they're knocking on so many doors trying to get through that are closed. So you can put legacy applications inside of one ring. You can put critical applications inside of another ring. So you create all these individual rings of defense internal to your enterprise so that they don't have just the one. Hey, I got through the firewall on the outside of your network. Now I get free run. They have to get through all these hundreds and hundreds of individual rings of defense, and usually most attackers either get blocked or they give up.
One of my heroes in this business is a guy named Greg Toohill, retired Brigadier General Greg Toohill, and wow, he's my hero. He's great. And just today, he sent out a little LinkedIn status update. We talked about complexity in systems, and he referenced a report from SANS, and he said what he's seen at Carnegie Mellon there is that many times these systems are getting very complex. You have legacy systems, you have current systems, you have cloud, you have public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, you have LLMs, and the complexity of these systems can bring openings for adversaries to attack. And so So how does Gary walk into an agency with his little bag and says, "Okay, we've got this complex environment and it's changing all the time. We have hybrid things and rules are changing and cloud service providers." So how do you maintain that zero trust effectiveness?
Sure. So first, shout out to General Tuhill. He and I served together. So,
Oh, he's a great guy, isn't he?
yeah, absolutely. But to in answer to your question, so the first thing is visualization, right? Is understanding that environment that you're talking about. How are things actually interacting with each other, right? You should be able to see that. You should be able to see connections between your hybrid environment, your different cloud environments, how your different applications are actually interacting with each other. And I don't mean based on somebody's understanding in an Excel spreadsheet. I mean an actual diagram showing real traffic. Once you have that visualization and that understanding, you can write policies that say these things should be allowed, these things should not be allowed. And then once you've done that, that policy should be self-updating. So as different components of an application change and the rules need to be updated, they should, new things should be added or deleted from rules dynamically. And if things move from one environment to another, those rules and policies should move with those applications, with those components, right? So you need something that does all of that. And as a little bit of a hint, if you go to illumio.com, you can find a solution that does just that.
ILLUMIO.com. I'll put that in the show notes and find out what's going on there. Gary, I spent about a decade in the classroom, and I inevitably had to give out grades. And guess what? Maybe Gary got an A, and maybe John got a B minus or a C or a D. And there's a range of, I guess, production in the classrooms that I've seen. And I would imagine that the federal government has a range of maturity levels with applications of zero trust. Our friends over at CISA have a zero trust maturity model. And so where do you see the challenges are in maybe people getting a less than an A score on this maturity model?
So I think the people that are getting a quote unquote less than an A score are those that haven't really stopped to think about what that maturity model means, right? So what I mean by that, John, is this. Too often when you look at any kind of maturity model like this, you'll see pillars, right? And it could be 5 pillars, 7 pillars. It started out as 3, whatever. But the problem is people sometimes look at each one of those pillars as, okay, step 1 is the first pillar, and I got to get to 100%. And then step 2 is the second pillar. Now I got to get to 100% in pillar 2. Well, that's a horrible approach, right? What you should be doing is you should be looking at it holistically and working across all the pillars simultaneously and applying it to the environment that you have. And quite honestly, there are things that are good enough, right? You may look and go, hey, at the identity level, I'm at a 80, 85%. That may be good enough because I've got a passing score there, but I've got a failing score in another aspect, right? One of the other pillars. So instead of chasing 100% in identity and being a 0% in some of the other pillars, right? The smart people go, hey, this is about a holistic grade, right? It's not about the individual grades, because you and I both know at the end of the day, what you really cared about was the grade on your report card, which was an average of all your grades, right? Not one grade, one grade, may have had some more weight, but at the end of the day, your final report card was a final grade based on your grades across all of them. And the most successful agencies understand that when they look at a model like that, it's not a simple left or right, step 1, step 2 kind of thing, that they got to approach it holistically.
Yesterday, I bought a ticket to Boston, and for me, that's a north-south trip. Okay, north-south, pretty simple to figure out. And in your world, you talk about east-west traffic. It's got nothing to do with going to the airport, or maybe it does. Right. So tell me about east-west traffic and limiting east-west traffic with the zero trust model.
Sure. So that east-west traffic is what we refer to in the industry as what's happening inside your enterprise, right? Traffic that is flowing back and forth between applications, between servers. And what we see in a lot of enterprises is that is a free flow, right? There's absolutely no restrictions. Everything's wide open. Anything can talk to anything. And that's a very bad security model to have. And that's why I reference back to my earlier point of what you want to do is you want to take that enterprise and you want to create rings upon rings upon rings of protection, which keep things segmented off from each other so that only the things that have to communicate with each other do. Nothing else is communicating with each other. And at the end of the day, like I said, if an adversary gets in, they don't have free run of the place. They've got to battle through locked door after locked door after locked door, right? So they got to keep kicking down doors to get through. So what you don't want to have is just one wide open room. You want to have rooms upon rooms upon rooms that an adversary has to fight their way through.
Well, I have a mandate here from the podcast gods that I got to talk about artificial intelligence every 22 minutes, maybe 22 seconds. So I have to ask, so what's Illumio doing with AI, and how is that helping federal agencies deploy zero trust in their environments?
So there's really two sides of this AI conversation. The first side is the one we're all familiar with, of AI doing advanced analytics, and Illumio applies AI to help surface threats, to help our customers zero in on things that they should pay attention to much faster. So looking for things like systems that are connecting to threatening IPs, nation state IPs, those types of things, surfacing where shadow LLMs are in use, right? Where in your environment are other people using AI models that you haven't approved, right? So that's a very, one way of looking at AI. The flip side of way of looking at AI is another application, and it's an application that itself needs protecting, right? So when I go back to this drawing rings around things, if you're fielding an AI model yourself, you should look at drawing rings around that AI model for a couple of reasons. One, to protect it, just like you would any other critical application inside your environment. And two, sometimes that ring can be used to ensure that AI model only looks at the data sources you want it looking at. Because sometimes we don't want it crawling the internet for anything that may be out there. We want it targeted at specific data that we have that we want to feed into that AI. Maybe it's internal policies or something like that. So you can use things like segmentation to ensure that AI model as an application itself stays contained and protected.
My avocation is studying languages. I kind of do that a lot, and I wrote down when you said shadow LLM, and my question is how long did Gary know about shadow? I mean, we talked about that 5 years ago even. I mean, it's a relatively new concept. And so just because you're up to speed with zero trust doesn't mean it's not a dynamic environment. Things are changing. All of a sudden, people are coming up. We've heard of shadow IT for years, but shadow LLMs, that's a fairly recent concept, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Right. So, we're all used to, talking about, the rogue person that plugged in something they weren't supposed to be using. But now, right, with the proliferation of AI models, and how easy it is to access these things, via a web browser. And what people fail to realize is as you start using those types of models, you're potentially feeding your data, your corporate data, your federal data. You're uploading it into a model that potentially could be accessed by other people that shouldn't have access to that data, right? So that's where these LLMs can get a little dangerous. I applaud the agencies that have taken the steps of saying, hey, we're going to adopt AI, we're going to write policy, we're going to put controls in place, for the use of AI. But you have to worry about the fact that someone's going to go off and go rogue, right? Just like they did in the old days with shadow IT, that they're going to go rogue and start using LLMs that they shouldn't be using. And again, once that barn door is open and you start uploading your data to those LLMs, who knows where it goes or who else has access to it.
So we're coming to the end of the interview here. We're in the Washington, D.C. area. Will you be presenting at any conferences in the next few months, maybe early next year, or where are you going to have a presence so people can grab you by the tie and say, hey, I got a problem?
Yeah, there's a couple of conferences coming up, some DoD conferences, Alamo ACE, going to be presenting out there. We got a couple of, I'll give a shout out for some of the FCA events that are coming up. And I'll put a plug in for the FCA Winter Gala that's coming up. Great event that supports some great charities.
Yeah, I have a whole list of questions that didn't get to half of them. There's a whole movement about DMD and the DoD and all kinds of issues with OT and zero trust. I mean, this is a very, very deep, wide topic that we can go on forever. And perhaps the next time we just talk about within the Pentagon itself. I mean, there's so many topics there with zero trust. It's a fascinating topic and a real good way to do more with less and to be able to handle a situation with reduced personnel.
Absolutely.
You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Gary Bartlett, Public Sector CTO at Illumio.